On this week's episode of the Crowdfunding Nerds, Andrew is away on vacation. Sean is joined by Chris Loizou of SBG Editions to discuss recapturing cancelled pledges with personal messages, advantages of GameFound, and which gaming conventions he has found to produce the greatest amount of sales. Let's get into it. Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by Hero Time Manufacturing. That is Hero Time, the numeral 1.com. Perch Gleck has been a regular on our podcast. We highly recommend his services. He is a man of integrity. Hero Time, they can make anything. They've got competitive pricing, and they even do game prototypes. So make sure to check out Hero Time, numeral 1.com. A link is in the show notes. And if you use the code Crowdfunding Nerds 101, you can get a 3% discount on your production through them. Let's get back into the episode.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Or the Alliance.
Amazing.
Well, welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the Crowdfunding Nerds. I'm just by myself today, but I've got a special guest, Chris Loizou of SBG Editions, and you're here to discuss your very exciting project, Ascendia, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Thanks very much. Good to be here.
So, why don't you tell us all about Ascendia? I know that this was a project that it's not your first project that you've done, but you went to GameFound and you had some very specific reasons for that. There was complications and you overcame a lot of things. But I think one thing we really want to tap into this conversation before we do a deep dive, but I just kind of want to highlight it here, is that you had a lot of success of reaching out personally to people who had canceled pledges and sending them a personal message and being able to win them back. So before we do a deep dive into that, maybe give us a broad kind of overlook of who you are, what is Ascendia, and we can go from there.
That's great. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, so Ascendia is a gateway plus game, which is, we really designed it with Philip Keel, the main lead designer, to make it very accessible to families, and but adding extra layers to the game so you can make it more, so it's fully scalable. You make it more complex and more strategic in terms of gameplay. And really, we set out to obviously crowdfund the game. It's really our first larger, more big box crowdfunded game. We have done a crowdfunding before on a smaller card game, Heroes of Thargos, and also self-published and self-financed 5 games in total. But these have been smaller games, so crowdfunding is a really crucial channel for us to obviously be able to fund these bigger games. In terms of kind of platform choice, that was a big decision for us. We did a lot of homework about this. There's a lot of pros and cons. And of course, you guys cover a lot of that in your show, but also it's all over the different Facebook groups. But really, we really weighed up the pros and cons, looking at the tools, looking at some of the financial aspects of the whole thing as well. And we chose GameFound as the right platform for us. Now, it's been challenging, and I want to put this kind of crowdfunding in context. It's currently actually at late pledge stage at the moment, but the context was, of course, as many of us in the industry, or some in the hobby, if it's a sideshow or a side gig, we've been facing the uncertainty around tariffs. There's been a lot of that, and sometimes some people may tend to hide behind that as an excuse for stuff, but actually it's a reality, and certainly we felt that. And I can detail that a little bit more as to how we felt that impacted the performance of our crowdfunding campaign. So really, we set out, the campaign started, it was a build up to the campaign, of course, collecting followers. We were just over 3,300 followers by the time the campaign went live. And we, of course, had a mailing list as well. I would have liked it to have been bigger, frankly speaking. We should have had possibly more people on the mailing list. But we had a decent following. So looking at the kind of figures that are mentioned on these crowdfunding platforms and conversion levels, we felt pretty confident we should be funding. Now, what happened very, very early on in the campaign was very early on. I mean, 6 hours into the launch, we were 33% funded. Very, very confident we'd be on the kind of 48-hour funding track, and then we kind of hit a wall. And there's a very good reason for that, frankly speaking. When we were getting together all our quotes for shipping and fulfillment at the time, and this is the time of going live, I have to stress it's come down a lot since then. There were concerns about some of the shipping costs. concerns around costs and tariffs and so on. Now, as a small company, we can't subsidize the shipping. It would be irresponsible for me as the company owner, as the business owner, to subsidize the shipping. So we try to be as accurate as we could be with the information we had. And I think this hurt us early on in the campaign because we after those 6 hours, 33% funding, we hit a bit of a wall, and we actually had 200 followers just literally drop off that first day. And we had a high proportion of super backers following us. We know that. We had a lot of super backers following us, and a chunk of those people were amongst them. So that certainly, it did hurt. It was painful at the beginning of the campaign. So it wasn't as fast a start as we hoped to have. And then to your point, the point you raised, we started seeing, as we went in a week in and so on, you get cancellations, you get churn in all the campaigns. I know that from other campaigns run by other people, but we were starting to see some cancellations. And of course, I went, made contact with every single person. So I personally emailed every single person who canceled their pledge. Of the roughly about 55% of people who came back to my emails, we managed to get back about 90% back on board. So,
wow,
pretty good about that. And I just wish more had responded to my personal emails. And they were very personal emails. This is not copy and pasting an email. It was really, we would be looking at some of the comments made. So, for example, and it was great because people did come back to us, gave us really pertinent feedback. Some of it was shipping related. So that just literally corroborated or confirmed what we felt was wrong. There were also other questions. It was very interesting to then run a survey where we ran a poll. And we tried to understand why some people weren't backing, why some people were still hesitating. And some of this also fed into some people who'd cancelled as well. Things like they wanted more information about solo play. A big one of the biggest ones, more than a third of the people who either were holding back on backing or some who had cancelled said, I'm not sure this game will fit my gaming group. So what I then set out to do is just have a very frank exchange as to understand the types of games they play, the kind of gaming group, the composition of the gaming group. So really these were, and I'd like to thank, if anybody else is watching this who is on the campaign, it was great. We have these exchanges. We have fantastic, candid feedback and great support. And when you're going through this emotional roller coaster of running crowdfunding, people can't underestimate the impact of a positive response, and great to hear back from you guys. Really appreciate the personal approach you have. And it was very interesting because I had some feedback when we did in the comments. We did a ton of comments. We're up to about 700 now, so there's a lot of comments. Quite an active, for a smaller campaign, it was very active in terms of comments and engagement. But I had some comments about why you're thanking the backers, you're thanking the followers, but why you can't thanking people who cancel their pledges. So that sounds really, really strange. You're actually thanking people who cancel the pledge. And I said, well, frankly speaking, those people at some stage in the process carried us over the line, over the funding line. They carried us through some of the stretch goals, and the fact that I was getting a great response back from those who actually cancelled. I've reached out to personally. And so actually, it was totally genuine. It may sound very strange, or why are you thanking them? They pulled out. Well, but they were there. They were there for the ride. They were there for some of that. Some of them were there and cancelled early on. Some were there right until the end. So, and I think that approach, it was a very candid, very open approach we had. I also tried to, over the course of the campaign, and once again, it's still in the later stage now, so we'll be having a similar format. But in the updates, nearly every update, I record a personal video. So, and just to kind of put a face to the name of the team and just get across our messaging, but also run people through the page, what they're actually seeing in the updates, give them pointers on the actual page. Because once again, the whole setting up of the page was arduous. It was a big task. We also took upon ourselves to do a 3-language page, which is, with hindsight, is a massive amount of work to do a complete French page, German and English.
Yeah, I'd actually like to stop there, because I think that what makes GameFound quite unique. I know you did this. You had language-specific pages.
Yes.
And we even had language-specific ads, because we were managing your ads. So there was this great we were able, on like Meta, able to target German speakers with German ads. with referral links and a referral code that took them to a German version of your GameFound page. So I think this is a huge advantage that GameFound currently has with a Kickstarter. So if you do have localized languages, you can have this very specific messaging for those audiences, which is really cool. But that's somewhat backfired. I want to tell people a little bit of maybe some of the ambitions of doing this, and kind of all the time pressures as a small team.
Absolutely.
I know that this did kind of harm you in a certain sense, but you were able to rectify it. But just tell us, how was that discovered and what was done?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one thing, when we set out, obviously getting our campaign and launching it, we'd already had a very clear indication of where we were going to be with stretch goals, what we were actually offering, and so on. But then you are at times when you're seeing that the numbers are not clocking up as much as you want them to, then we look at some daily unlocks, and then we started to iterate certain ideas. Is there some bonus card we can come up with to help, drive that engagement and keep that flow moving? So we were iterating really fast, and then of course errors creep in, and then you're looking at did we do the German translation of that last thing we changed? And really it was Philip and myself literally behind the scenes, running the show on this, on the page specifically. There's other people in the team involved in graphics and other stuff, but it was very tough to keep up with that. And and then some things creep in, some typos, some mistakes. Oh well, this has not been very well written, we had some bit of criticism on some stuff. But once again, we were, I think the fact we were very, very transparent, very direct in our communication, reaching out every single time personally, thanking people personally. I think that carried it through, and it's interesting because our account manager and even a lot of people said, "Well, Chris, we've seen the page, we've seen the number of followers. You guys should have funded. You should really fund it really fast." And I think the shipping impact was massive, but then I just think the context. I just think there's a lot of uncertainty. Normally, most of these campaigns, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the campaigns is 50%, 50 to 60, US backers. Percent, sorry, are US backers or more, and in our case it's more like 2023. So so definitely that US centric strong backer base didn't turn up for us. We hope there's a lot of them in amongst the 2,900 plus followers, but they didn't turn up. Certainly in the early part of the campaign, not all of them. Those who did, we thank them. But yeah, that certainly had an impact. And people saying, "Well, are you just going to cancel it then? Are you just going to cancel it then just restart?" I thought, we've lined up all our communication, all our marketing, schedule them, the newsletters, schedule banners on Board Game Revolution, other banners on other websites. All this is, other people know, it's all scheduled, everything's timed and programmed. And equally, it's a weird one, but it's we're totally committed to it. So we just powered through. And actually, I had really good feedback from our account manager at GameFound. Said, "Chris, good on you. You just stuck with it. I've seen other people pull the plug. You just stuck with it. You kept on working really hard, and we could see clocking up. We could see some of the initiatives you did. You did a 48-hour, free mini expansion, and that gave you a bump in pledges and so on. We just worked through, and it's been tough. It's been a very steep learning curve. With hindsight, we were looking at the kind of audience. What's the GameFound audience? We obviously analysed the two platforms, Kickstarter and GameFound. And GameFound, without oversimplifying, is very miniatures heavy, big box games, campaign type games. That seems to be the bulk of a lot of the games that fund well there. And we thought it could be a good fit for us. The game we're presenting is not specifically in that field, but a lot of the gamers on GameFound backers have families, have kids, maybe have a partner not running that much into gaming. So we thought that the cross section of the audience of GameFound for our game was actually huge.
And you've got some nice miniatures, so you got that.
Exactly. So we thought, and of course there was a lot going through our mind. Is it the right platform? Is it the right thing? And frankly speaking, I also keen to kind of test. We'd never run a campaign on GameFound. She's a pledge manager for GameFound for Heroes of Thargos, the card game which I did on Kickstarter. And I thought, no, let's give this a shot. The guys, and I have to say, the guys in terms of the account manager and the team, marketing team, and so on, the GameFound team have been fantastic in communication and support, very available. So really nothing to fault there from that perspective at all. It's just really, was it the right platform? Was it the right timing? The fact we didn't have the shipping figures where they should have been on the launch was an issue, and that hurt them. That really stalled the momentum. But then we did power through with a personal approach.
Hey, crowdfunding nerds. If you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you. All right, now back to the show.
It was quite interesting to see because you had this large following. And one interesting thing about GameFound, when you send an update, it tells you how many people open and even how much money you made from that update. And the other advantage of the GameFound update is that it features your update on the front page. So kind of at the bottom, near the bottom of the page, you do kind of get this extra bump of engagement. And what we were noticing is that you maintained a high open rate, and you weren't losing followers, and you were slowly gradually gaining followers. So it wasn't like you were stagnant. So this meant that we'll just keep on trudging along. And I've noticed this with other projects on GameFound for maybe smaller publishers or first-time publishers. You don't have a large existing audience they can bring from other, like another campaign, or they have a big email list. Is that we've seen something very similar where they don't fund in the first 48 hours, but every day they're getting a trickle, and it's not kind of deadpanning like you see on Kickstarter. I think it might just be because there's maybe a different audience on GameFound, or I think in Kickstarter, there's so many projects that if it hasn't funded the first 48 hours, there's so many other projects to look at, and you can kind of just wash your hands. Whilst on GameFound, I think there's a far less number of projects, so people, they might not see your project hasn't funded, but they might reconsider it later if they see it again popping up, and it probably will pop up again because there's just fewer projects. And then I think a lot more people understand crowdfunding on GameFound. Maybe it's a more kind of hardcore audience, so they understand that, okay, well, this is actually making progress, and that it's likely to get a boost of the 48 hours. And I see that there's a lot of communication here. So I think the funding that we often see on Kickstarter shouldn't be applied to GameFound. I think they are different platforms, and they have different users with different kind of trends. So it's been very interesting that the kind of trends on Kickstarter and on GameFound have been very different. So I think for anyone who's planning on going to GameFound, if you launch and you don't fund the first 48 hours, that might not necessarily mean you weren't funded. Because we've had lots of projects that have launched and have got pretty substantial amount in the first 48 hours, but they haven't funded, and they've seen this gradual trickle come in. And I think there's a lot of kind of unique things on GameFound, like the fact that you make an update and it gets featured on the front page. So how often were you doing updates, and how often were you kind of being featured on the front page?
Yeah, I mean, we were, let's say, kind of at cruise speed, because the other thing, the campaign was 5 weeks long. It was definitely on the long end. And I did that at a time with a mail shot and a newsletter was going out. So we extended it by a week, more than I really wanted to run it for. But we tried to, on average, every 2 or 3 days is to have an update, and then we accelerated right towards the end. The last 72 hours, we did almost an update daily. So, but it was every 2 days, every 2-3 days. As long as you have things, meaningful things, a value add in the update, that was important. We also, I think, we also had to kind of get the narrative back onto the gameplay, the game design, the visuals, and all the cool stuff about Ascendia. And I think the first 2 or 3 updates were very shipping centric. We're to the point that, I kind of felt, did I really need a third update? But I think we did, because people were really, that was an issue, and we wanted to really clarify that. And it was nice to see in the comments people react and say, great, you've read our comments, you've reacted, you made an effort, you fixed things, great, you got the shipping costs down, great to see. So that was good. But the updates are really, the actual update tool, I think, is great. I love the fact you can edit the updates, you can go back to them, you could, because often see things you could add to something, or even some things are dynamic. Like, for example, we talked about an upcoming live stream for a sculpted miniature, and then we go back to the update and then actually add the link into the live stream, the time lapse stream. So you could kind of keep those updates alive, because some people only see them 2 or 3 days later. We noticed that as well. Some people seem to be open 2 or 3 days after they were sent out, not within the first 24 hours. So the tools are there. It was the timing. So we went against the trend. We had 3,300 followers. We were hoping for a kind of 10% conversion minimum. So 330 followers, backers, sorry. And, we're approaching 300 now, but it's been a very steep learning curve. And it's interesting as well, because we have 4 other games coming to crowdfunding. They're a stagger over the next 2.5, 3 years. Deliver, obviously, Ascendia first. But then we're really looking down very, very closely about where do we put these other games, Should they be on Kickstarter instead? And there's kind of some of the games will be on Kickstarter, some probably end up on GameFound as well. So it's going to be very platform specific. There's one thing I'd like to say though, and I've seen this a lot. You see these kind of marketing figures banded around, and no criticism of that because I've got a marketing and sales background myself, so I know how these things are important. But one thing I would really love both Kickstarter and GameFound to do is to when they talk about conversion rates and average conversion rates per follower and things like this, they really should segment and put to one side the Awakened Realms, the really big campaigns that have 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 followers and massive and big IPs in one basket, and then give us the figures for those, which will probably be even higher, and then have another basket because they are, of course, trying to attract smaller backers and creators like myself and others to their platform, and really give us a granularity and a description of performance on the smaller campaigns. That would be a far more transparent piece of information for us to make the decision, and Kickstarter do the same, because it's all nice. I mean, we see these rankings. We got the first or the top 3 multi-million euro or dollar funded projects on in crowdfunding ever. Great marketing, good messaging, great. But the multitude, the volume of us are much smaller than that. And to see actually how I'd love to know how comparable size campaigns to ours really performed. And that for me would be that's really valuable. And then as a creator or a publisher, you can really make an informed decision as to what is the best platform. And that's in everybody's interest. It's in the interest of the platform to better perform, we perform better. But I wish really they have to kind of listen to this and hear. I'll get the message out there myself as well, but they need to understand that granularity and segmentation. And where the cutoff is, I don't know exactly. Is it the level of funding, how many big campaigns they've done, but some kind of criteria to distinguish maybe first-time creators or maybe 1 or 2 projects only and sub $100K something. I don't know, but there's a cutoff somewhere where they can make this into 2 segments at least and really give us the figures based on that.
Yeah, I think another thing that people need to keep in mind when GameFound often releases figures, they often don't mention that they're also including VAT in those figures, whilst Kickstarter isn't. So that's something you also have to pay attention to, and that's not necessarily clear. And if you start trying to compare Kickstarter to GameFound, well, GameFound is collecting VAT. So I got to add an extra 22, 25% to those numbers, or subtract that amount from those numbers to kind of really get an understanding of them. Yeah. So I do think there is some type of, they're using these numbers, I think, in a way that's strategic to make their platforms look very impressive. I think both, you're right, both platforms are doing this. So publishers should be absolutely aware that this is happening, and to take some of those numbers maybe with a grain of salt, or be a bit more skeptical or a bit more pressing and understanding how those numbers are coming about.
Exactly.
So with all that being said, I know maybe we could dive into your strategy in terms of reaching out to people. So the idea is that when someone is backs, you get their payment information, you get their address, you get their email, and then they cancel, and you still retain their email, and you've been emailing them, or do you message them on GameFound when they've canceled?
No, I go into, I'm literally like Cerberus guarding. I was literally guarding the order tab in the actual project page. And I was going into that all the time because I was watching to see where the funding was going. And as soon as I thought that looks a bit strange, I think it may have gone down, or hasn't gone up as much as I thought it would have done. I've been patrolling that. I'd be on there all the time. I'd be looking at that tab 10 times a day at least. And as soon and because I think I have half decent memory, I would immediately see a red line in the wrong place, a cancel in the wrong place in the table. I think that's a new one. I'll go straight into that. You obviously find the person's email, and then you reach out to them. And of course, in terms of the wording, you have to be, very sensitive to the fact they've just cancelled and just courteous and thank them. That's the thing. But some people found it strange. I was actually openly thanking people, even on the comments. But I'd actually personally thank them. Thanks for backing. Sorry we lost you along the way somewhere. Was there anything we did? And I would actually ask, was there anything we did wrong? We could have done better. Was there, any information you were lacking? Anything that didn't quite click, and sometimes it's no, you did nothing wrong, but I'm backing too many projects. That was another one, backing too many projects, and I had to pull the plug on 1 or 2 of them, and you happen to be the one. Others were, well, actually, now you mention it, there was something on some of the more advanced gameplay, and it was great because there was one guy, for example, I think in Latin America, who was really interested in solo play, for example. He's like, I haven't seen enough on solo play yet. I'm not too sure how often I can play this game with my friends. So solo play was a really big part for me. And knowing that, I said, well, actually, we have an update coming out in 3 days specifically on solo play. And please hang in there for that and have a look. And that person got back on board. And it was interesting. That happened a lot. And of course, in terms of us, even though you have a roadmap of the kind of things you want to convey and communicate during the updates, it gets steered very heavily by people in the survey saying, well, actually, 34% of us want more advanced gameplay information. Then suddenly, you know what, Philip, the update we're going to do on the graphic design update, we'll do it later. Let's now pivot. We were doing, there was a lot of agility, frankly speaking. We just had to be, and hopefully, and I think if people want to read the comments and the exchanges we've had with people, that came across. People said you were really, really responsive, really reactive. You listened, and it was nice because you could sense in the beginning some people were reticent or hesitant to get on board, to jump on board. They were following, they were commenting, they weren't backers yet. So I was always looking at the backer number. Oh, this person's commenting quite possibly, but they're not a backer yet. So, but it was very interesting because they would then, you could see they're kind of sussing us out. And are these guys, are they credible? What are they up to? What are they proposing? Another big one for us, and this is an interesting one. This is a big topic about funding levels. Is it a realistic? Is it a really low funding goal to say, oh, we funded in 32 seconds, or is it a, So we had a funding goal of 22,000 euros, and a couple of people, I think one person in particular, said, I think that's too low. I don't think you can make such a game for that kind of money. I think it's a fictitiously low funding goal, but had I really wanted a really low funding goal, I would have put 10,000 euros and we would have funded in a day for sure. But it was the true funding goal. It is the true funding goal, and literally we can make the game that cost. So,
that's because you're willing to take certain sacrifices as a publisher.
Absolutely. Yes. The thing is, I was very transparent. I actually wrote a very, very long comment, which I then pinned for quite a bit of time because I didn't want to go down the flow and be hidden. I put this right at the top. So we're transparent. If there's any people concerned about, is that 22,000 euros realistic to make this big box game, I kept on putting it back up and explaining the whole strategy, how it was financed, how it was put together. And, the thing is, we've been around for 3 years. We've been around for 3 years as a publishing company, a game publishing company. We've already released 5 games, and so there is some financial backing. That we do have. We're pretty solid financially, and we deliver. And the thing is, we self-financed and localized games. We're at most of the game shows, the Gen Cons, Game Expo, Essen. The last 3 years, we've been all those shows, really, Gamma, and so on. The thing is, we now need to go to the crowdfunding to help us with these bigger box games. Of course, there's molds involved. There's a more upfront cost for inventory and so on. So there are more of an investment, but we're here to stay. And but we just decided. I put the real funding costs. I put the real shipping costs we had at the time, which weren't brilliant. Once again. So, I could have hidden some of the shipping costs and then bumped up the price of the game, and then put a fake or not a real. There's a lot of things we could have done, but the choice was and has been total transparency. WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. I actually quoted that in a couple of emails to people. This is us. So, hopefully we inspire trust. And of course, trust comes with delivery. So actually simple as that. Hopefully people have backed us and believed in us. So they'll see we'll deliver something really nice, and they'll feel inspired to join more of our projects, because this is the big one of, I said, 4 more to come. So a lot going on there.
In terms of cancelled pledges, did you notice any trends throughout the campaign? For example, did you see more cancelled pledges on Tuesdays when more projects launch? Did you see more cancelled pledges when you sent out updates? Was there anything or was it kind of just sporadic? Or did you actually see kind of trends of when people were cancelling pledges?
There were some trends. Some updates possibly didn't hit the mark. Also, I guess I'm not in everybody's, mind on that one, but I guess sometimes some people may have multiple projects they've backed, and then the updates are prompt. Oh, that one. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I'll pull out that one. Or it may be just a prompt. It may not necessarily something they've read in the update. I really don't like that.
Yes.
I think some of that is kind of a human nature. It's just a prod or a prompt. Oh, that thing. Oh, yeah, I backed that 2 weeks ago. Not sure anymore. Or I moved on. Other things may be something they've read in the updates. And this is the thing, because I think about 90-95% of our updates always had polls in. So we had polls in nearly every single one where we felt it was relevant. And we had a fair amount of engagement in the polls. They were great. Those who did engage were great. But I always kept on saying, if you haven't got the information, if you say no to this question, please tell us below in the comments why you said no. Others will never know. And we didn't get a ton of engagement. We got some. Some people were very vocal in a really good way and generally really constructive. I mean, people I think were fantastic in terms of the interaction we had through comments, and we continue to have, and really, really motivating. Once again, the impact of a single comment says, guys, great, we're with you, keep up the good work. It's a massive morale boost when we're a little bit, we go through ups and downs. There's a bit of I'm sure anybody who's done crowdfunding, you have, especially when it hasn't funded immediately and is not smashing through stretch goals, you have moments of solitude and uncertainty, to put it mildly. But it's the good thing is with the GameFound as a platform is a good platform. The follower, this is still a mystery to us. We haven't been hemorrhaging loads of followers. We're still 2,900 plus, and we kind of had a discussion about this. Why are people still sitting on the fence when they've had multiple polls? We reran the survey 3-4 times, and it kept on collecting more people. But actually, the most vocal people on the survey were those who backed it and said why they loved what they saw. So, but we had about, I think about 40-45% of the people who responded were people who hadn't backed it. But it's just we have this hunch. We may be wrong. We'll see that possibly some of the people now still sitting on the fence are waiting to see the pledge manager come out with the final shipping costs and all that to be crystal clear. So maybe that's why some people are still holding back. But there's still, we're still getting a fair amount of opens on the emails. It has, of course, gone down because after 32 updates, it starts to kind of, starts to go down. There's still quite a few hundreds of people opening the emails, the updates, which is positive.
Yeah, I wonder if followers are less valuable on GameFound because they really have different purposes. I don't think you can compare Kickstarter's followers of a project to the same degree as maybe GameFound's followers to the projects. So one example of this, it's backers can only comment on Kickstarter projects, whilst on GameFound, anyone can comment. So maybe following then is less about, I'm actually interested in backing this. It's maybe, hey, I want to keep an eye on this and I might want to leave some comments. So you might get a different kind of approach to people, different psychology of people in terms of following. In terms of anyone being able to comment, do you think that's a benefit or do you think it's a negative on GameFound?
It's a double-edged sword. It's like anything. I've loved the fact that some people have been commenting and still to this day are still not backers, but still commenting, still engaging. They're probably still trying to suss out, or trying to determine if this is a game for them or if they like what they're seeing. Also, it's a great means for a creator to actually identify those people and reach out to them. I did very personal, even in the comments, I'd have someone comment, oh, this looks interesting. I like what you've done with the graphic design. And I think, that's 3, 4, 5 comments we have for that person. They still haven't backed. I'll reach out to them. So anything else we can answer, any other questions, from that perspective, it's a great way to identify followers who could be backers and actually give them a name or something. If it's an avatar or some pseudonym or something, at least you can actually approach them. You can actually through the comments interact with them as opposed to anonymous massive followers. The downside is, we didn't get much of this at all, but you may have someone, I've seen some other campaigns, someone just pop up with a hammer, hit the design on the head, and then disappear down a hole again. You can kind of you can almost feel they had no intention of backing because of the way they've just interacted. We didn't have that, I have to say, but I've spoken to other people who run campaigns where they felt it wasn't great because some people kind of came in, I wouldn't say they sabotaged the campaign, but they did come in. Some people have stirred things up and turned up and said, "Oh, it's all AI art," or "This is all this," or this is. They've said something or criticized something, and then just when they've had and then just disappeared again. So you don't really know how that wasn't necessarily really constructive. So I would say, that's the other side of things. But from our perspective, if I had to choose, I'd rather have the GameFound approach to giving as many people as possible a say. Because that, I think in our case, helped us convert some people who would have probably just dropped off and just disappeared. And no, not for me. I'm not seeing the stuff I'm not getting responses to or not seeing the things I want to read, or I'm not, because I can't engage with them. They're not saying what I want to hear, and it's just an extra opportunity for engagement. So I literally would do that. I patrol the orders, look at all the cancellations. I patrol every single comment. I look at, right, this person's now commenting and they haven't backed yet, and I reach out to them, and we also pulled in some more back as a result from those people.
So if a publisher was to come to you, Chris, and they were to ask you, they've got a game, and they were to ask your opinion, where should they launch? Should they go on GameFound or Kickstarter? What would you say for both platforms? What are the advantages and disadvantages of each platform, and which platform would you generally steer them towards?
One thing I noticed, I've obviously been studying a lot of these different campaigns and how some of the very successful ones are being run from the graphic design perspective, the polish of the products, the polish of the games, how definitive they look, the prototypes, everything. I'd say, in a very, I think very, very, most definitely, a lot of the GameFound projects up there or campaigns are very polished. You know, I think the Awakened Realms and so on, that kind of benchmark of some of the stuff those companies do, people are striving. I know personally some smaller companies who are really aiming to, hit the mark in terms of visuals, graphic design, content creator, reviews and so on. They're really trying to benchmark. So a lot of things look very polished. And it's good to strive for that because, of course, it's pushed us. We upped our game. If I look at the first page we had and where we kind of ended up, we've come a long way. There's still a long way to go, but we're very happy with the journey we've been on. I would say if you come in as an indie publisher, a smaller publisher, with a more indie type project where you're showing some sample artwork, you're showing some gameplay, you got a couple of good reviews, but it feels more like an indie project. I would think actually Kickstarter may be better from that perspective, because I do feel there's a little bit more. Well, there's a huge amount of projects on there, a whole variety of smaller projects that do well, that fund well, and I may be wrong, but it's my interpretation that some of them. I mean, of course, there are some on Kickstarter that are really polished and finished, and just as much as they are on GameFound. But there seems to be a lot more of the smaller publishers who still have that kind of in that indie. I can only afford to show you this much at this stage of the definitive artwork, but based on the crowdfunding and stretch goals, we can then show you more. We'll actually finish the game. So it's just a gut feeling that some of the smaller publishers can have a slightly less, not polished, maybe it's not the right term, but not be as advanced in the process of the game design, artwork, and everything else as they would have to be on GameFound, because literally there's less. In some ways, there's less competition, but because there are less projects on GameFound, and they are, I feel, if you look at the kind of quality, how they all look. I mean, often a lot of them have a lot of miniatures, so really, and that's another criteria as well. But really stunning miniatures and fantastically lit and rendered and really fantastic stuff. We look at stuff and say, wow, no, it's amazing. I'm on there too much. I end up backing stuff. But the thing is, there's a lot of really good stuff on Kickstarter, but I do feel there's still more of that indie access. And of course, we can see it because you can see how GameFound are targeting. So obviously that tells you there's a gap. They're targeting tabletop RPG designers and authors and so on with this new RPG initiative they're building up. They want to start, because of course Kickstarter is massive for RPG tabletop role-playing games, and there's definitely a move now to bring some of those across. So there's a real initiative to focus on that segment. There's also an initiative to bring over more indie publishers for sure, but I still feel that GameFound, a lot of big box games, and a segment which I'd love to study more, hence why I want that split of figures and performance, to have that other tier, that other segment of the smaller indie type publishers like ourselves. I think I get the impression, once again, the footfall, the organic eyes on the project in some ways on Kickstarter could be higher. As the conversion rates, it's hard to kind of compare them for me, because once again, we don't have the same criteria, and that for me is the biggest thing. It's still a bit of a dark art. So once again, it's about, for the publisher looking at this, it's really, I know it's cliche, but bring your own audience, as much as you can, and Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think you really need to look at what's funded on which platform and where your game fits in the portfolio. If you see a lot of if you're launching a party game or some kind of family game, quick 20-minute card game, well, really spend time in that category on both platforms and really have a look and see what's done very well, what they've done well, and really that will give you guidance, because you can't really massage and modify completely your game to suit the platform. You have to find the right platform for the game. So hopefully you're at a stage of the game design that you're actually quite advanced, and then you have to go and see, well, where does this fit? Is there, oh damn, there's like 5 other games just like mine launching the same week on Kickstarter. Well, either you change the launch date, or maybe it's not the right platform. So it's a lot of things to consider. There's no one size fits all.
So GameFound has this really interesting feature called Endgame, by which as your project is about to end, if you get a backer, it kind of resets the timer for a certain amount of time. And it basically means that the campaign could theoretically never end, because every time you get a backer, it kind of just extends the fun period. I know you enabled Endgame. Did you find that was a boost at the end of the campaign, or do you find that it wasn't so much so?
I was really excited about it. I love the idea. I thought it's a clever way to gamify the campaign, and I think gamification of these things for games is pretty cool. I love the idea. I didn't hesitate to enable it immediately as soon as we had the choice in the admin section. It didn't perform the way I hoped it to, but that was literally just that tied in with the last 40 hours of the campaign anyway. I've compared this before where, I enjoy a glass of champagne, but to open the bottle, the last 40 hours, it ran out of gas. So literally, we were hoping to have as steep an ending in terms of backers in the last 40 hours. But literally, that was also, I'm not going to blame on Agricola, but that was coming out. That was actually at the same time as some of the big stuff that came out. Literally pretty much the day we were finishing, we had big campaigns coming out at the same time. So I'm not saying that's the only reason for sure, but it may have had an impact. And I think we were completely drowned out in that noise. So the last 40 hours, including Endgame as an extension of that, were quite disappointing. We were already hoping for a bump, comparable to the start, another bump at the end, as you see in most campaigns. And we saw bumps earlier on when we did our own last 40 hours for an expansion. Like I think 1/3 into the campaign, we had a nice little bump then, but we're hoping for a much bigger kind of bump in pledges at the end. That didn't really happen. But once again, we didn't get a ton of fallout of followers. So still there again, we're still a bit of mystery. I would have expected to have a lot more followers then trail off and be losing a lot more people. So it's an interesting one. Still, the jury's out on that one. So we'll see when we go to the pledge manager if more jump on board. But that's a bit of a mystery. But yeah, I think it's a great Endgame. Love it.
So I know that GameFound themselves helped you in several regards in terms of maybe just even some consulting, but even helping you with marketing in terms of getting your project sent out on their email list. You know, talk a little bit of the ways that GameFound helped with marketing and kind of pushing your game out there.
Yeah, one of the things, of course, being in their newsletter that's a big plus. A chunk of our pledges came from the newsletter as a direct result. We could see it with the referrals. We could see that very clearly. So the newsletter was a big bump. When we got a lot of eyes on our page, it did quite well. So that's a big part of it. In terms of the marketing team, they were just their engagement, their availability, their professionalism. They were really fantastic. Frankly speaking, I'm now re-engaging a little bit with a Kickstarter as of this week, actually very recently. But yeah, that's kind of a benchmark in terms of reactivity, responsiveness, and so on. They were very, very good. We also used the AdFound. We used AdFound, which in the beginning performed quite well in terms of the return on the investment of the spend. We were, in terms of follower numbers, we were growing. But then that also kind of petered out a little bit, and actually we got you guys involved at that stage because we wanted more. We wanted more of a handle, more granularity, be able to be more responsive, because of course game I think AdFound is a very, very good tool actually, in that you can obviously upload your creatives, different variants of the text, and they'll do all the testing behind the scenes. So it's a very nice way, especially for smaller companies or people who don't really have the experience of managing Facebook ads, to get content there, get traffic to your page, get people seeing the page and so on, and grab followers. So I think it was good, but all equally I think there may have been some limits And once again, was it with the right messaging? Were we on the right platform for the audience we're trying to target? There was a lot of things that may have hurt us a little bit. And we actually, if people look at the late pledge page now, we actually had some great feedback from a chap called Brent, who if he sees this or hears this, he'll know who he is. But he gave us some great feedback. He said, Chris, I backed it, really excited about the game, and I feel it's a pity. I should have done better, really. I think this game really should be doing even better. And he said, I think maybe the way you guys went about the messaging maybe didn't help, because you do have a lot of, gamers into heavy games, big box games, campaign stuff. And really, he said the fact you did this big kind of push on the family side on that platform maybe didn't. We thought we've got tons of families. Obviously, there's parents on GameFound and backers, but had you rephrased it, and we've actually rephrased it, really putting an emphasis on the scalability, because we work on saying, well, there's a core game, and then you can add to it. But we said, well, actually, you can say exactly the same thing, but change the messaging, which is you have a more advanced level of the game, and you can take layers back. So it may sound pretty obvious, and actually now with hindsight, it's fantastic, because of course when we had people say, I'm not sure if this is a game for my gaming group, because actually what someone was trying to say was, well, maybe a bit too simple for them, maybe. But when they saw the more advanced gameplay modes, they suddenly realized actually this is good. And we've been actually astounded. We've been running more than 400 people have played the game in the last few months, or the last 5-6 months, and families, groups of friends, and so on. And the chunk of those are backers, which is good. But we had people who were into more heavyweight games. So this is great. Actually, this is a game I'll actually be able to get out more often. It plays fast. It's simpler, but you still have the kind of heavy game vibe, without the complexity, as much complexity, and without the 2 or 3 hour game and that. So it's getting, so that we're getting the messaging right. Don't have make sure you're really tight on your shipping figures as well. The problem was we just had uncertainty. When as a business owner, when it was going to go ahead, I wasn't happy with the shipping the way it was, because we didn't have all the information in, and there was a lot of uncertainty. So you take a decision. Are you going to announce a certain low shipping rate, and suddenly when it comes to Pledge Manager, which has happened, we all know that, it's happened a heck of a lot, where you announce something and then suddenly everything, we need another 30, 40, 50 bucks to fulfill. And we've heard all the horror stories of things that never got fulfilled, even after people put hundreds of dollars in. So we came in, guys, to the best of our knowledge, here's where we're at. We're hoping it will come down. And here's the real funding cost. Here's the real funding level budget. So in hindsight, I could have said 10,000, not 22,000, reduce the shipping costs and try to subsidize that, hide that in the cost of the games, which many people can do. And we didn't choose to do that. So the net result is we've actually dropped the shipping costs now, and so that's positive. But yeah, it's a very, very steep learning curve for us and the team, really.
And in terms of GameFound's marketing, they offer banners at the very top of the page. Is that something that you were able to avail of?
Yes, yeah, and that was good. That was good. That worked quite well. Obviously, you'll notice when once again I was watching all this like a hawk. I was refreshing my page. I was seeing how often we were coming out. I was really looking at everything I could possibly, as much information as I could get from what was happening behind the scenes, on the page, on the mobile, on my cell phone, and trying to see. And you kind of see some of the bigger campaigns. They'd be, let's say, if you have 20 banner refreshes, they'd be getting 4, 5, or 6 slots on the 20 banner rotation, and we come up once in there, or maybe twice, maybe. So, of course, there's different bandwidth, and I'm sure there's other algorithms, or maybe they paid a different package or something. But there's the presence rate obviously varies depending on the campaign. But also, I do like the fact that the updates go to the front page. That was good, because we would get eyes on. I was looking in the beginning. I thought, how comes we've had X number of followers and this number of emails have gone up? Actually, a lot more people actually seen our page, but of course, then you realise then they come organically through clicking through the front page because they've seen an update. So that was good. I think it's a tricky balance for any crowdfunding platform. You want to be able to give every single creator as much bandwidth and as much exposure as you possibly can, but it's all about, they're always juggling, they're always jostling for space and screen time. So it's like product facing in a supermarket. How many how many cartons of milk you have lined up based on the brand. So the facing and the kind of visual presence you have in it, whether it's on a shop stall or on the website, they can't give everybody all the bandwidth. So we understand that, but it's it's really interesting to see how, because smaller companies, one day some of them will become bigger. So that all of these bigger companies started small sometime, and it really is knowing how they want to onboard smaller publishers and creators. And so there's real value though, because of course, when I'm pulling in 3,300 followers, a lot of those, about I think 300 or 400, 500 maybe, which is in proportionally is very big, were totally new to crowdfunding, not just GameFound, but totally new to crowdfunding. So I've invested in marketing spend, marketing dollars in Facebook ads and organic marketing to actually pull in 500 new people now following and probably backing other stuff, of course. So really, as we help all these crowdfunding platforms build up massive numbers of people and mailing lists, we also, you want that just reward for that. You want to make sure things perform well, and you want the conversion rates. So, you do expect, we modeled 10%, 15%. We had different modeling levels. Average pledge. We actually did better on the average pledge, than we thought we'd do. So that was a positive.
Yeah, I think stretch pay certainly helps there. What was the kind of percentage of people who stretch pay versus people who just paid everything up front?
It was quite high, actually. It was quite high. We had, I think it was around 45% of backers use stretch pay. That's another thing we did, because we initially, because we were aiming for a Christmas release, we had a 4-month stretch pay. And we could tell for some people, there was definitely some people on the edge of that. It was a little bit on the borderline in terms of financing the project. So when we increased just the impact it had, adding 2 more months and into 6 months of stretch pay, that saw a lot more people get on board then. So it has a huge bearing. And I think obviously some people, they may have $50, $60, $70 a month, or $50 for their hobby, the gaming hobby. Could be buying dice, could be buying a new game mat. But a lot of them now, because of things like stretch pay, they will then be putting that into their crowdfunding projects, plural. So they're $12 going here and 14 there and 7 here. So they're spreading out their hobby spend per month across multiple games. So certainly for people like ourselves, they don't have a massive IP and they don't have a massive following that just really could just jump on the project. It was a major part of the success of us getting funded was stretch pay. And then stable pledge is another one. Stable pledge is another, of course, another good one. With all this uncertainty, putting in stable pledge as well is, especially when people have had those kind of horror stories of crowdfunding where they've gone all in for $300 and they're then asked another $100 top up. That's really hurt a lot of people, especially when things don't get delivered. So we were also keen to activate stable pledge, so people are reassured. The prices we're mentioning, this is realistic, and if there's any deviation above 10%, then of course we get our money back. So
maybe just explain for people who aren't familiar with the stable pledge option. So it guarantees that the pledge is not going to change in price, and if it does, people get refunded.
Yeah, more than 10%.
Okay.
So it's good that there's a delta, there's some tolerance, because we're in uncertain times on many fronts. Mm-hmm. So having some tolerance makes business sense for everybody, including for the backers. But that's having at least, kind of worst case scenario. Okay, I know that if I put in, $72 for a game, it'll only go up another $7.2, and that's as far as it'll go. It won't go much beyond 80. So I think that's reassuring for people, and they can spread it out. So you can spread out the payments, and they know they're going to get bad surprises. So I think it's a big selling point, and I think that's also been some of the reasons of the rapid growth of GameFound as a platform, stable pledge, and the obviously having the payments, stretch pay. That combination is a very powerful combination. The another big one is also, I actually haven't looked at this, but maybe on Kickstarter now, but another big one I thought was a good thing to have was the follower gifts as well. Having these follower gifts and things like this, which are there, they actually feature on the page. So follow and get this gift. And we've seen some campaigns do really well. I've seen some campaigns grow thousands of followers literally, I feel my analysis was on the back of the follower gift, a big chunk of that. I've seen some put some really, very, very good follower gifts, and they've really increased the numbers considerably. And I think some people actually, they backed on the back of, well, I'm going to get the follower gift and it goes with the game, so I'll get the game as well. But some of the follow gifts have been almost like a third of the value of the actual game in terms of value if you want to buy them separately. So there's been some big follow gifts, which I think will be a real incentive.
Yeah. So Chris, you mentioned briefly that you've done a lot of conventions. I know you've made a good deal of your sales at conventions. So maybe you could just highlight some of the must-go-to conventions, either in Europe or the US, or what would you recommend that if people want to sell games, what conventions should they go to?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we do Cannes, which is the big French international show, normally end of February, March. And people who are outside France or not in the French-speaking gaming world don't always maybe appreciate how massive that is. It's well over 100,000 people. It is a big gaming convention. It's the biggest one in the French-speaking world. And I may get corrected on this, but the French game market is one of the biggest in the top 4, I think, worldwide, the gaming market. So it is a big market. So Cannes is 20 minutes down the road for us. It's an absolute cinch from that point of view. So that Cannes is a different one. UK Game Expo.
For Cannes, would you need to be able to speak French? Is that kind of a must
You need some French crew on the stand, on the booth. You need some French, but you can get away with. When our first Cannes, we sold us English games, and we had PDFs of French, so we managed the first time. But obviously, having localization is obviously better, and some of the crew should speak French for demos and stuff. Absolutely, that's a good thing. The other thing is UK Game Expo. It's now, I think, as of this year, it's now entered the top, the big gaming conventions. Now it's now in that category. It's been going from strength to strength. It's a great show. It's a really good show with a very, very vibrant gaming market, a gaming industry, a gaming hobby. And it's good for sales. So also, I think one well worth doing with very reasonable furniture rentals, which is really worth knowing because that's quite a big expense for a lot of people who have stands at these shows. So they're very reasonable in terms of pricing, I find. Essen's the biggie, of course. Essen's it really is the big show, and we've done it now. It'll be our 4th year this year. It's always been good for us. It's a great showcase for new product launches in particular, and it's just a massive, massive gaming community. Having games in German is a plus, definitely, we found, and having at least 1 or 2 German speakers on the stand is definitely good to have. But you can get through a lot. You can scrape through with English quite well, but you will. To choose a game games, they will choose German over an English copy, generally speaking. So obviously language and localization is important there. But it's an expensive show and getting more expensive, but it's still very good. We've done Gen Con. Gen Con is great, but what I found there is when we've done Gen Con, when you have a small stand or a small booth, a 10 by 10 or a 3 meter by 3 meter, 10 foot by 10 foot, it's very, very hard to kind of stand out, frankly speaking. You need some real stand presence. You need a larger, even if it's multiple publishers sharing a booth or a stand, you need enough stand presence. If you're just in a only front open or 2 sides open little booth or stand, frankly speaking, it's not easy to stand out. We found because there's just so much stuff being launched. There's so many massive marketing messages going out, big releases. We introduced Heroes of Thargos, a card game, to the US market the same year that Lorcana was coming out. Well, what did I do? Here again, wait a minute. So, my wife Karen was womaning. She was in charge. She was running. That's a funny one. She was on the stand, on the booth, and I was actually going out with our flyers to this massive queue of everybody queuing up for Lorcana. And I was handing out flyers. I actually handed out 2,000 flyers personally. So my arm dropped off. And people liked it. And we actually, I think we had about 80 people as a result come to our booth just from that queue. So happy with that, very happy. So we actually did very well. But it was just, if you just sit in your little cubicle, your little booth, and hope for everybody's going to rush to your stand, unless there's a massive buzz or something and you're the next Exploding Kittens, it's very, very hard. I find it's very hard to stand out there. And of course, there's a massive waiting list. It's a good show, but there's just so much positive noise around you and so much going on that you kind of get overwhelmed, and you need a foothold. You need a decent booth or stand presence there to really get noticed, I believe. And then of course the great ones for us, all the small regional shows. I'll say to any publisher, any indie publisher, or any self-published person making games, get your local shows. That for us, because we always analyze the income per square meter. We're in France, but we've actually worked out how large the booth was, how many tables we have, and we actually figure out what was the return per square meter. And we obviously monitor that very closely. We need to have the right level of staffing as well. Essen last year we were understaffed. One person pulled out, and we actually were down by one. We should have one more person anyway, so it was a little bit. We literally didn't have every single table manned. We actually we had a couple of tables. We had to run from one to the next. So that wasn't ideal. But we look at obviously the return on the booth size and cost. But the smaller regional shows, some of them are totally free in France. We do a lot of French ones, but we do around about in addition to the 3 or 4 big shows we do a year. We do probably about 20 more.
Okay. Smaller
20
ones.
more. And they're small ones. They could be one-day event. They could be a weekend. And we also do things like medieval or Renaissance festivals or shows, those kind of things. There was one here recently near us in France, which was an Southeast Asia culture event. So it had things from food trucks and arts and crafts and jewelry and artwork and other things. And we had a little stand there, no cost at all in terms of the stand or booth space. And it was our highest grossing show for the tiny little space we had. So because there's no competition, there was no competition. We're the only games company. And then what I'd say to anybody in that kind of situation is play the local card as well. You're going to have people who buy local, say, you're a local company. Oh, yeah, I'll buy this. I'll buy this instead. I was going to buy this thing over here from a big publisher I won't name, but I'll actually go and buy this from you guys. So that I'm really a firm believer in small shows, small events, and they may be thematically connected without being necessarily a gaming convention. I mean, some of the historical stuff, we do the medieval show, and of course we have to all dress up and all dressed as knights and everything else. So we have to dress up. You have to get in character, and you have to. Yes. Actually, it's an obligation because some of these Renaissance or these historical events, they're very, very strict on even your stand, your tent design, everything has to be medieval and authentic. It's not something you just order off Amazon to dress a kiddie at Halloween or something. It doesn't fly. So we've had to invest in some fun gear as well. But those shows are great. I really strongly. And the nice thing is, once you build that network of the smaller shows, and they do another show and another event, and year on year, 2-3 years in a row, you build a fantastic network of local fans. And in fact, a chunk of those are backers on Ascendia, because we actually have our highest backing nation is France.
France, yeah.
So on Ascendia, because that was a lot of people we actually met face to face. So that worked really, really well. So yeah, small events. Hunt out, look at those small events, whether you're in Texas or Hamburg or Birmingham, and just hunt down those small events because there's less competition, they cost less, and in terms of return on investment, they can be fantastic. And for us, between two events, so 2 bigger events, where we got to get a spike in sales, and then there's a bit of activity in terms of the web shop and so on. These kind of smaller events, they keep the kind of cash coming in and keep things flowing in between 2 larger events. They're very important.
Wonderful. Well, Chris, we've covered a lot of ground. We will include a show in the show notes. We'll include a link to Ascendia for people to check out the campaign and also maybe think about backing and getting their hands on the game. Is there anything else you'd like to wrap up with? Anything you would want to direct people towards?
I'm actually really. I'd love to be able to, converse and discuss this and just share our experience in more detail one-to-one with anybody who wants to reach out. I'd love to even prevent time out of a busy schedule, but it would be very nice just people have a talk about this and go into even more detail about how we've tried to run our campaign. There's a lot of other people doing things better than us, frankly speaking, and we're trying to benchmark, and see where they're at and how they're positioning themselves and their marketing and so on. So there's a lot to learn, but we we still have a long way to go, but at the same time, we've come a long way as well. And I have no doubt some of the stuff we discovered the hard way, if I can help anybody or make any suggestion and avoid some of the pitfalls, it may sound a bit cliche, but it's exactly what happened with some of the things we dealt with. And also that personal touch. I mean, that's something which really, for a smaller publisher, where you haven't got that social proof enough yet, it's actually crucial. How else do you stand out? Hopefully you stand out with the visuals and a nice game, but actually, it's about building rapport, building trust. This is what this whole thing's about. And crowdfunding there's always a risk. It's always in the terms and conditions of all these crowdfunding platforms. Your pledge, your gift or your reward is not guaranteed, and be careful. And people, of course, sadly, have not got their what they've actually invested in. But the thing is, we've learned a lot, and just transparency, regular communication. Once again, we're far from knowing everything on this, and we're still a long way to go. But we can share a lot as well.
Wonderful. I suppose they can reach out to the Crowdfunding Nerds community if you're in there, and we get touch base there. It's been a pleasure. Glad to have you back on in the future. Maybe talk about another campaign you've run. But it's been great, and we'll let Robot Richard sign us out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.
Hey, Crowdfunding Nerds, it's Andrew Lowen, and I wanted to introduce you guys to the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. If you don't know, we have a do-it-yourself course system that will teach you how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on your launch day, and that is our goal. I have used these systems to help raise over $30 million for tabletop campaigns, over 200 tabletop crowdfunding campaigns since 2019. I've generated over $100 million through e-commerce sales using these processes. These courses teach you how to replicate our results. They're made for the small creator. Over 150 of those people were first-time creators. These courses contain hundreds of hours of podcast discussions and tons of details that are almost impossible to find on the internet. And they have been distilled into concentrated courses that you can absorb quickly. They are designed to generate results. We hold nothing back. Visit crowdfundingnerds.com/academy to learn more, or just Google search Crowdfunding Nerds Academy.